Thank you, Jim. Yeah, go Rages.
We have started up.
Yes. Okay.
Go ahead and start talking. I'll do this.
So I'm glad to be here this morning, and thank you all for inviting me. I am a member of the E Club for World Peace, and as Jim said, I'm also on the Rotary Peace Committee, and we
lost you.
just finished the 2021-22 recruitment for the class that is coming in, and you all should have seen an email that came out from us saying, yeah, you can invite more people to apply now for the next year. And we're really excited because this last year we had the biggest number of class apply, and it was very, very competitive, but we're thinking that it will be even much more competitive going forward. But excited because we have a new center in Makerere, Uganda, which means we have a few more slots open. Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, you want the speaker view?
Yeah. We can see both.
We won't be able to on here.
Or you won't?
It's controlled on the Zoom side,
Oh, okay.
on the actual Zoom side.
Yeah, all we'll do is just, okay. So here you go.
All right, thank you. So as I was saying, we have the new applications for this year are open. So please encourage as many people as you know to apply. I think District 5450 has not had somebody in the process for a while, but I think we have lots of wonderful people here in the community who can benefit from this scholarship. And it would be wonderful to get someone we can support either from this club or from the district, which would be wonderful. This morning, I want to share something that I've been working on for a while and something that I'm excited about. And that is the fact that we all need to be thinking about how our world is changing and what we can do about it. And it's important for us to do this because all the trajectory or the trends we're seeing around the world are pointing to what I'm going to be talking about today. And we as Rotarians have a great way to support peace around the world by doing almost, something we can actually do within our own families, within our own communities. So I'm gonna be talking about the 21st century city and how we can think about this city as being, or this new trend being the place where peace needs to start. Traditionally, we've thought of peace and conflict as being between people groups, especially in tribal groups like where I come from, rural communities that do not work very well with each other and who are not necessarily at peace with one another. And so you hear of all these civil wars in Africa and in Latin America and other places. But did you know that that is actually moving into the cities now? The cities are going to be the centers of operation for our society in the next, not too far from now, as we'll see from the demographics here, the cities are the places where everybody is moving to, and which means we're bringing everything we've always lived with into the city. But before I start on that, I want to share an inspiration, and that is my grandfather. This man was born in 1919, just passed away at 100 years of age in 2019. I wasn't able to go for his funeral, but he made an indelible mark in my life because when he was just a teenager, he was abducted by the British colonists who controlled the country at the time. Kenya was a colony of Britain. I saw Tony here on the call. We're good friends though, now. And he was put in forced labor for several years. And after he was released, he comes back to the village and restarts his life. Afterwards, he joins up with several other people who form what is called the Mau Mau, the freedom movement to liberate the country. And for him, the goal was to get the country back to its own freedom, the people to live on their own land, Through that process, he loses everything. He's jailed for 12 years. And of course, when Kenya gains independence in the early 60s, he comes back, but he's starting from nothing. So when we come around in the 1970s, he's trying to train us as young, as his progeny, as his grandchildren. He's trying to train us how to live in the world. And somewhere around the way, something changed for him. And he realized the world that he had grown up in was very different from the world that we were going to be growing up in. And so for him, it was a real priority to get us through school. And he said, you must go to school. You must learn how to relate with people beyond what I did when I was growing up. And you must learn to know the rest of the world in a different way, not fighting the British anymore because there's nothing to fight anymore. You actually must learn how to live and work with them. He had every right to be angry. He had every right to carry that bitterness all the way to the grave. But I saw him the last almost 50 years transform himself to be a real peacemaker in the village, and not only in the village, but even within the country, where he became a voice for real collaboration, understanding, and compassion between peoples. And those of you who know the history of some of these places like Kenya, you know that we have real tribal tension between groups. And my grandfather became a real force in that process to help people understand each other, all the way until his death about a year and a half ago. What Grandpa did not realize is that what he was seeding in me was a goal that will go on to live through him, through me, and I hope through my children and my grandchildren in very different ways. I ended up in Los Angeles, and I studied Los Angeles for my PhD. And my study was on how a city like Los Angeles could have better human relations. Now, most of you who know anything about Los Angeles, you know it's one of the most multi-ethnic city in the world. But it's not just Los Angeles. You can name almost 50 cities now, London included, Sydney, Lagos, and others, who are completely multi-ethnic, that they no longer are a one group, one ethnic, one racial group that is based in this one city. My studies showed that this trajectory of how cities are going to change is going to accelerate as technology accelerates, as economics accelerate. We're going to see what is happening in Los Angeles become even much more common elsewhere, so that you can go into any part of the world and what you're going to see is what has already been happening. That in 2010, 81% of the population in the United States were living in cities. When you project forward into 2050, that population is going to grow to 50%, I mean to 90%. And that this is United States. There are other countries much smaller than we are, which are accelerating even faster than we are, especially if the country is actually coming into development. Now, the reason why that's the case is in the US, you can live the farthest from any city and still have the services, many of the services that we enjoy here in the city. But in some countries, if you want the kind of technology, if you want the kind of services that we want, that we enjoy with development, you have to move to a city or something that is urban. So this trajectory is going to happen. The other thing that is happening around the United States and is happening around the world as well is that countries, communities are becoming much more diverse. You saw the picture of Los Angeles. It's happening in New York. It's happening in almost every city you can think of that is several million. I mean, the population is in the millions. The reason why this is, the reason why countries and communities are becoming more diverse is the same reason, is because we are moving from rural communities into the cities, and some of us are moving around the world. And by the way, sometimes our conversations here in the country seem to be more people are coming here to the United States. It's not only here. It's actually happening everywhere else in the world. I know, and the data is there too. There are millions of Americans who are moving out to other countries as well, immigrating. So migration and immigration is going to continue to make our communities, our societies much more diverse. But that diversity is coming into specific places. It's not going into the rural communities. Those are not the places that are becoming diverse. It's the cities that are becoming diverse. So places like China and India, which are still rural, are going to transform a great deal. And it's in these places we're actually seeing more and more cities become even bigger and bigger than, you can imagine, than the Los Angeleses of this world. And the projection is in only about 9 years, we will have about 43 mega cities with more than 10 million people in the world. So that shift globally is going to put us almost 70% of the globe is going to be in about living in cities. Now, all of you know that spells quite a number of things. So I now put this picture out there to show you, how it's going to line up. Look, the cities that are actually becoming much more diverse and populated are mostly in Asia. And we have put the cities here in the US that will continue to grow in the bottom in red. And that, if you think about it, and you think about what's happening here, is some cities that are not even in the map, cities like Lagos and Kinshasa, Congo, are on the top 10 cities that will be quite populated. Now, these cities are not set up for 30 million people, at least not the infrastructure as yet. So what happens when you put a huge number of people in one place that is not really prepared for them? Your guess is as good as mine. There is going to be tensions. I drove here this morning. It was a 30-minute commute from my home to the club meeting this morning, and there was an accident on I-25, which meant I spent a little longer than I wanted to be, and I was getting a little anxious. Now imagine those of you who've driven anywhere else, and I travel quite often to Cairo and to places in India, and the tension you feel even just getting around the city is palpable. So if you put this number of people in any one given place without the kind of infrastructure we should be developing, you can imagine some of those things will happen, more often. But even more the case is that the competition for resources, whatever else is happening there is going to be huge. Now we know the cities will also be contributing a great deal to the GDPs of our countries. In fact, it's already happening in most places. Many of the countries rely on the populations within the cities to provide for most of their exports and other production within the countries. So there's this tension. We need the cities because the production is in the cities. You can do more with a population that is together because you can provide for the infrastructure, and that makes the production levels go up higher, much quicker. So countries know that the cities are the places where you should invest. But as more people move into the cities, the strain on resources is going to be higher. So that tension is with us. The World Economic Forum says, projects in a recent study, they project that cities are actually going to be more important than nation states, even on issues to do with foreign affairs. And we're starting to see some of that happen. Cities do not have the same luxury as a nation state in meeting needs. If there's a pothole in Golden, they're not going to wait for the governor to announce anything. They have to fix the holes. If there is homelessness, the city has to take care of it. Which what happens is the city council and the city mayors become more important people in the structure of our leadership. And you see that as you look around, there is a lot of city mayors associations and city to city organizations that are coming together to figure out how do we solve our own problems locally. So we're not waiting on the federal government to think about what to do. After all, they are mired in divisive politics. Here we have to solve problems. And by becoming better in solving problems, they become stronger in terms of what they can demand from whether it's the federal government and how they communicate between themselves around the world. Cities Alliance, which is the first group there, as a very robust way of working with mayors around the world, or the global parliament of mayors, where they actually vote each other into office and they have a budget and they work on issues that are pertinent to the cities. So this is a movement within within this century that is helping us to see something different that is developing. It's no longer where it used to be Colorado or it used to be someplace else. Cities are becoming the center of power and the center of economic development. Now, we know we can and we should be able to solve things like transportation because technology is helping us do that. We should be able to move water and move sewage and move all these other infrastructure development. Technology is probably going to be our best bet in terms of solving those kind of issues. The issues that we have as a bigger challenge is our human relations. We are yet to start thinking of designing our cities with how we relate to one another in mind. And I can only speak strongly about Los Angeles because I studied that place for almost 6 years. Los Angeles is completely spread out. I mean, it's spread miles and miles around. There isn't very good thought of who is moving here and what are they going to need, what do they want, what is their cultural perspectives of space and use of space, how do they relate to other people in different ways, what is it that is of most of the biggest interest to them. So city ordinances sometimes conflict with cultural practices in many parts of Los Angeles. And some of you know that that is happening here in Denver as well. In fact, in Westminster, where I live, for many years, there was an ordinance against keeping chickens. I bring this up because it's funny to me. I grew up in a village and chickens all over. But there was an ordinance against chickens. But who is moving to Westminster? This guy who grew up with chickens and thinks that chickens are, I mean, I have a yard, I should have chickens. And the city will not allow the chickens because, you know, they have their own reasons. And I couldn't figure that out. Now, from my cultural perspective, I shouldn't have chickens in my backyard. So, you know, imagine somebody else moving from Costa Rica or from other place, and they have their own interest of what it looks like to live in the city. But the ordinances and the ways we organize ourselves and how we design our cities are not necessarily thinking about what I bring as an immigrant and what you bring as somebody who moved from East Colorado or some other place else that you grew up in. So I think our biggest challenge as a society will be our human relations. And it is our human relations. We saw what happened in this country last summer when you live in a society where, you know, a group of people or groups of people feel they are being left behind, or they are something about what's happening in their society is not right. And that can only be bottled up for so long before it blows up. Now, why are human relations important? It's because we all bring with us culture. And culture is the way we are raised. It's the values that we were brought up with. It's what your parents, you know, seeded to you, not just your body, but what I call the software for how you relate with one another, how we relate with one another. It's what makes us human. It's the thing that told me this is the most important thing. Is this is how you relate to people and to society and to property and to anything else. So that software is ingrained in us. None of us stops to think, why am I acting this way? Because when you are a young child, you are trained in a certain way and you really don't think about it much at all. So it's taught and it's caught, and that's socialization. The results of which are the institutions we form, the identity we put on ourselves, the kind of groups we hang out with, including Rory. That these are the results of culture. And if you go to another society, those of you who've traveled, if you go to another society, you find they do things slightly different. They form different institutions. They relate to people differently. Male-female relations are different from how they are here. That is culture. And that is what impacts our relations with one another. We start to think, especially when we cross boundaries, we start to think about the we and they. So this is how I see myself, and that's how they see themselves. And this is that's the differences that culture brings between us. And then, of course, every culture has some of these. We have stereotypes. There's certain things we think that white people do, or black people do, or if, my students, I can tell you this, my students think that because I'm 6 foot tall and I'm black, I should play basketball. That's a stereotype. I cannot dribble the ball to save my life. That's a stereotype, but it's what is ingrained. And some of the stereotypes like that, like that you can dribble the ball, those are innocuous. They don't have any big meaning. They don't affect me a lot. But if there was a stereotype like if you're an African, you are lazy, that has impacts and has implications on how I relate or how I am accorded certain opportunities. Those things tend to be the problem. Those kind of stereotypes and the things that we've been brought up with in our communities tend to be the problem. And then you obviously have majority versus minority relations. This is a problem everywhere in the world you look. It is not just here in the United States. It's a problem even in communities like Kenya, where you have some tribes that are bigger than others. And we do have to start talking about this and thinking about it, because in most cases, minority communities, and some of you who follow China know that's going on right now, we have to start talking about how do we figure out our relations between these two groups, between groups within our country. By the way, it happens even in smaller cities, like even here in the United States. So here are some questions I have for us for the 21st century. How do we start as a society to seek a common narrative? What really binds us together? Because we will need to live together. Now, it might not be some of us, getting up in age, but our children and our grandchildren are going to have to figure out how they live together. What will be the common narrative that helps them to figure out how to live together? Globalization is not going away. It is here. If you want to know that globalization is going to be here, next time you go home, look into your closet. Look at all the labels on your shirts and your dresses and your pants and your shoes. Look at where all those things have been made. Very few of them have been made here in the United States. We will still need globalization, if for nothing else, for our consumption. But we will need it because it actually makes our world a much better place. So I suggest, the question I have there then is, can globalization serve us better? We will still need people, we'll still have people moving from the United States to go live in Guatemala or in Kenya. We'll have Kenyans coming here. We'll have people moving from the UK, and I hope it's not too many of them right now, moving to other parts of Europe. There will be people always moved. That's how we populated the world. We moved. Our ancestors moved from whatever place you believe Garden of Eden was, or the savannah, whatever the place, we moved and we will always move. So, what is going to be our narrative? What is going to be the benefits that we gain through these movements? Can we have a moral reimagination beyond individualism to the common good? And who is going to help us to do that moral reimagination? I want to submit to you that I think as Rotarians, we have a good place to start. Our four-way test is a good place to start. As an organization, we value peace. We support the efforts of peace development in different parts of the world. That moral reimagination can be led by a group like ourselves. And then when you think about the United States, I like what Ellen Lead, the Pulitzer Prize in Music winner for 2019, was quoted as saying, can we reimagine the American dream to be something that is a little more towards human relations and equality? Equality in the sense, in all the senses that we can think of it, instead of the competition and individualism that we've made it to look to be like. Well, someone else writing a few years ago said, the strength of America is actually lies in its diversity, and that is supported by immigration. The reason being, very few other countries in the world have had the kind of immigration that we've had. Very few other countries in the world have had to wrestle and struggle with bringing this number of people together. Yes, that's where they are going. That's where most of these countries are going. But we have had the history of struggling through trying to bring desperate groups of people together. Even when you think about Europeans that ended up populating this country, they were from different countries and different cultures in Europe. And somehow they had to figure out how to do that. So diversity is our strength. It's not a weakness. And we need to figure out how to do that. So what can we do? What can you and I do? I think I said the four-way test is a good for us to begin as a group, but I think it has to go further than the group. It has to go deeper into who I am as a person and as a human being, to live beyond this divide that I can see. The divide that I really would like, I'm a Meru. Meru is my tribe, and I don't care about other tribes. The Merus are the God-chosen people. And who cares about the Kisis and the Kikuyus? I have to go beyond that, because in the new world we are creating, my being a Meru and living in a village is not going to cut it. I will have to interact with the Kikuyus. I have to interact with the whites and the blacks and the natives and everybody else. And I think being intentional about being a peacemaker in this world today is the best thing we can do. I think the next thing is, I want to be the solution to creating what we are calling the we world. And the we world is where we are thinking beyond, when we had the induction earlier on, it was the idea that think about how you can live beyond yourself, how you can serve others beyond yourself, and have fun with it, in the process, because there is a lot of fun in this as well. I suggest that some of what we have to think of is what my grandfather then taught me and taught us. This was 2019, a few months before he passed away. We celebrated his 100 years of living. I was blessed to be in Kenya in June. He passed on in that December. And as we were talking, and as we've talked over the years, he was very clear in his mind. And he talked to all of us. We were there, almost about 50 of us in the room. And he said, when he was growing up, he and his generation fought against the British to gain independence. But our role now was to work with the British and to work with people like the British to formulate a world that will benefit both the British and ourselves. What Grandpa was doing here is socializing us and socializing anybody who can listen to him to think about a different world, a world that is a we world, a world that is common for all of us. I suggest to us that that's what we need to be doing. You have contacts. Those contacts are sometimes, where is the gentleman? Your grandkids, who made the soccer. I used to play soccer, football. Yeah, football. I used to play football, so I know that, it's that son, that grandson needs to be socialized to think about the team, the world. We need to think. I have two boys, and I'm teaching them to think of beyond themselves and to think about the world we are living in. Sustainability, care for the environment, care for other human beings is not just good for me, it is good for all of us. And I suggest that that's where we start. It's what I can do by being an intentional peacemaker, living in a way that helps me to pass on these thoughts, these ideas that grandpa and others have, saw help us to develop a different society. So my challenge to all of us today is really to think about how can I be an intentional peacemaker in my space? The government is not going to do it for us. Political parties, if you haven't noticed, cannot do this. And unfortunately, although I'm a church person, churches are awfully inadequate in doing this as well. But we can do, as individuals, from our perspectives, we can start by inculcating, socializing, encouraging the people around our circles in our spaces, including our children and our grandchildren, to think about a different world. And I believe that's how we're going to change our cities from becoming places of crashes to places where we can work and live together in peace. Thank you.
I think we need to take time to take one question from the audience and one from Zoom. And we'll take it off the, anybody from the audience have a question?
Yes, sir.
You talked about cities versus urbans versus rural, and it struck a chord in me that in our state, there seems to be a greater separation between urban and non-urban. And we're trying to get a transportation bill passed, for example, is a clash between urban and rural. And those have failed 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Because urban says it's mine, we're most of the people, we don't care about you.
Yes.
Shouldn't we be investing more in rural and not so much in urban?
Can you repeat his question?
So the question is, especially in Colorado, there has been a movement, a strong movement, especially proposals to develop the infrastructure that connects, especially the urban centers with the rural communities. And there has been tension between the rural and the urban centers. And so shouldn't we be working together? I agree with you, we shouldn't be working together. What I noticed though is that even as I said, there are people moving into the city, there is obviously going to be the number that stays in the rural communities, and they need to be provided for. If we're thinking of a we world, the cities will not leave the interns out. They will think of the rural communities as just as important as having the cities provided for. Why? Because cities do not grow any food. Cities rely a lot more on the rural communities. So a development of a system that thinks that the city, yes, we see more people coming here, but we do need to feed them. We need to, be able to provide space. We keep expanding into the rural communities. So thinking about how to develop the city better, or actually, if we were working together, we would actually also develop the rural communities as well. The allocations for resources that we need it's not a zero-sum game. It's not if the city gets it, the rural communities should not get it. And I think what our politics have taught us or have continued to propagate is that if one group gets it, the other group does not get it. And that is completely, that's deficient thinking, and it's not going to take us very far, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's the same as at our national level, or federal level. If one state gets it, then the other group doesn't get it. If one political party gets it, the other one doesn't. That kind of divisive thinking will not carry it in the 21st century.
Thank you.
Any
And
questions
and
on
it
Zoom?
and it is football, not soccer.
Anyone on Zoom have a question? Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Kinoti. It was really an interesting presentation, a lot to think about. And I think as Rotarians, we really believe in the concept of the we world, and we keep working towards that. In recognition of your speaking, please know that we are investing in youth, which is the future of the we world, through our scholarship programs, our youth leadership programs, and youth development programs. So thank you for this.